This video is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon! I want to eat your cereal! In 1984, Jerry Laybourne took over as president of Nickelodeon and began the process of bringing it out of its status as a loss leader into being one of the most popular cable channels ever. One key thing to happen in that initial year was the acquisition and airing of old episodes of Lassie, a 1950s television classic. The response from parents watching the channel with their children was very positive, and Laybourne realized something. While Nickelodeon was a cable channel for children, children weren't the ones buying cable. It was the baby boomer parents buying cable, and anything that could entice them to buy would be worth it. In 1985, Nickelodeon added shows like Star Trek the Animated Series and Dennis the Menace to regular rotation, and created a secondary channel to air after Nickelodeon ended for the day called Nick at Night, a home for classic television that the baby boomer parents would be nostalgic for. Nostalgia bait isn't a new thing. It's been around for a while, thanks to the rise of media-based childhoods and the decline of working at a factory-based childhoods, and nostalgia bait programming has been a critical part of Nickelodeon's success over the decades. The only thing that's changed is the generation they're selling nostalgia to. Now, instead of the baby boomer parents, we have the millennial parents, and instead of selling you your memories of television from the 50s, they're selling you your memories of Nickelodeon in the 90s. This has come from many directions. Reruns of shows like All That and Kenan and Kel made their way into Nick at Night for a time. Nickelodeon's secondary channels like Nicktoons and Teen Nick have given space for nostalgic 90s reruns, and the rise of YouTube and social media platforms have let Nick cast their nostalgia bait hooks farther than ever. And recently, we've seen an uptick of revivals of classic Nickelodeon properties. Revivals are big everywhere right now, of course. Will and Grace, The X-Files, Gilmore Girls, Twin Peaks, Roseanne, Mystery Science Theater 3000, The Twilight Zone, Boy Meets World, Murphy Brown. They're all coming back. Everything's coming back. They're television zombies and they won't stay dead. But this is the Halloween episode. Get in the spirit. And yes, Nickelodeon was primed to get into the revival game, even on a management level. In 2018, Brian Robbins took over as president of Nickelodeon. Robbins having worked for the company in the 90s as a director and producer on such shows as All That, Kenan and Kel, Cousin Skeeter, and The Amanda Show, as well as the director of the 1997 Nickelodeon film Good Burger. And under his watch, the nostalgic revival train has pulled into the station, and not as haphazardly as it could have. The shows being revived are ones that don't require a strong sense of continuity. Double Dare is a game show. All That is a comedy sketch show. Blue's Clues and You is a preschool show where continuity doesn't matter that much. We're getting a new Rugrats in 2020, but Rugrats barely had a continuity to begin with. This is important because while these revivals are meant to appeal to the millennial parents, it's going to be for naught if you alienate the child demographic with tons of fan service and in-jokes. Sure, you can have some old faces in there, and even a few moments to make parents weep for their lost childhoods, but these shows have to appeal to the kids of today, even more so than appeal to their parents. I believe this is part of the reason that the revival movies, Rocko's Modern Life, Static Cling, and Invader Zim Enter the Florpus, didn't air on Nickelodeon, and were instead put on Netflix, because both are drenched in fan service and in-jokes. And while they're both very fun, they don't have an easy point of entry for new viewers. Not every series is going to work as a revival. Now, a horror anthology show, that you could bring back without much problem. And in October of 2019, we saw the return of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Every story begins with these words, followed by the title of your story.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this story The Tale of Mr. Top Hat and the Carnival of Doom.
Are You Afraid of the Dark is a 3-part miniseries that aired on October 11th, 18th, and 25th, 2019. This is the story of Rachel, played by Liliana Rai, a new girl in town who makes a lot of spooky drawings of monsters. She gets the attention of the Midnight Society, a club for telling scary stories around a campfire in the woods, a club that's existed since the 1930s. Among their ranks is Graham, played by Jeremy Ray Taylor, a germaphobe and horror film geek. Louise, played by Tamara Smart, a cheerleader who doesn't want the other popular kids catching wind of her creepy interests. Akiko, played by Maya Chek, an aspiring horror filmmaker, and Gavin, played by Sam Ash Arnold, Rachel's cute next-door neighbor. The Midnight Society wants to see if Rachel is up to snuff for the club, so they task her with writing and telling a scary story. If they like it, they'll let her in. Now, Rachel has been having this reoccurring nightmare, and turns that into a story about the Carnival of Doom, a horror-themed carnival led by Mr. Top Hat, played by Raphael Cassel.
You may experience things here that are going to shake you to your very core. Right down here, right? But just remember, everyone, it's all part of the
show.
However, the horrors of the carnival are not as artificial as Mr. Top Hat claims. It abducts some children and then vanishes, erasing the memory of everyone who went to the carnival. This story is sufficiently spooky, and Rachel becomes the newest member of the Midnight Society. But the next day, a real-life Carnival of Doom with a real-life Mr. Top Hat arrives in town, exactly as Rachel described it, and kids start going missing. The Midnight Society is freaked out by this, and nobody's sure if they can trust Rachel, but they decide to investigate. And so begins an adventure that sees the Midnight Society surviving a zombie-filled tunnel of love, a collapsing Ferris wheel, lots and lots of scorpions, and the greatest evil of them all, Idaho.
Idaho. Idaho. Idaho. Idaho. Idaho. Idaho.
Idaho. Idaho. Drive me to Idaho.
My own private Idaho doesn't say Idaho as much as this show does. The history of Are You Afraid of the Dark goes all the way back to 1990, but we'll save that for the proper Nick Knacks episode. The Are You Afraid of the Dark revival began life in 2017 as a movie being produced by Paramount Pictures, a subsidiary of Viacom. Horror movies were also having something of a nostalgic bait period, with works like the 2015 Goosebumps movie and its 2018 sequel, which also stars Jeremy Ray Tyler, and the very successful It in 2017, which also stars Jeremy Ray Tyler. Man, that kid gets around. Disturbia director DJ Caruso was attached to direct a script by Gary Doberman, whose credits include It, Annabelle, and The Nun, so a pretty big name in the modern horror movie scene. But Paramount must not have felt the script was working, because Ben David Grabinski was brought on board to do revisions. In contrast, Grabinski was not a writing A-lister. His biggest credit prior to this was the 2016 Jackie Chan, Johnny Knoxville comedy Skip Trace, but he was a big Are You Afraid of the Dark fan, and had a lot of ideas. I was writing a movie for this producer, Matt Kaplan, in summer 2018. It was another horror movie. At the time, they were doing an Are You Afraid of the Dark movie, and he needed a writer to come in, and I wasn't really on anyone's radar. But I was like, guys, I really, really, really love this, and I feel like I know exactly what this movie should be. I wrote a 20-page single-spaced document, writing down what I thought a movie should be of Are You Afraid of the Dark. Everyone was seemingly blown away by it. At some point in the process, Nickelodeon decided they wanted to make the return of Are You Afraid of the Dark into a multimedia event, with a new television series to go along with the movie. Nickelodeon, impressed by Grabinski's script, approached him for his ideas. So Grabinski pitched a pilot, but it wasn't quite right. The exact details are unknown, but I get the impression that the TV pitch might have had too much fan service, and Nickelodeon was looking for something that was accessible to new young viewers. So Grabinski went back to the drawing board to make a story that would properly introduce the Midnight Society. I wanted to come up with something that would work for 10-year-olds who've never seen it and for someone like me who grew up with it. I texted the producer, Spencer Berman. I want to do an evil carnival. I want Raphael Cassel to play the bad guy, Mr. Top Hat, who's like an evil Willy Wonka. That's really all I had. They really, really responded to that. And then I broke the story for it, and then it was like a bullet train because they decided, oh, we want it to be out next October. The movie version ultimately never got off the ground and is now no longer on Paramount's list of projects. The television series morphed into the 3-part miniseries, which was announced in February of 2019. Directing duties were given to Dean Israelite, who had previously directed the 2017, better than anyone predicted it would be, Power Rangers movie, which means he seems to have found his niche with solidly decent 90s children's television show revivals. The Are You Afraid of the Dark miniseries is very solid young adult horror, and I think a worthy continuation of the franchise. I usually don't worry about spoilers for Nick Knacks, but since this is so new, like I'm writing this 2 days after Part 3 aired, I'll try not to give away too much. The Carnival of Doom is a very classic feeling horror concept. You already have the baked-in fear of clowns, you have that unnatural lighting, and there's the scorpion motif. I'm not afraid of scorpions, but if you are, this is gonna get ya. It's very much in keeping with the spirit of the original series, a horror scenario that's simple and can be done on the cheap while still being very effective if you film it right. This is in contrast to what they could have done, which is a bunch of references and in-jokes. If there is any, they're small enough that I didn't catch them. The miniseries replicates the mood and atmosphere of a classic Are You Afraid of the Dark story, while not being beholden to the greater mythology than there's a group called the Midnight Society that's been around for a long time. Mr. Top Hat follows the classic show formula of give a charismatic actor an over-the-top costume and let him chew the scenery. He fits right in with the show's rogue gallery alongside the likes of Sardo the Magician, the Ghastly Grinner, and Dr. Vink. It really feels like a classic Are You Afraid of the Dark story. You can totally imagine a cheaper, less cinematic version of it as a Season 3 episode. What some might argue is not in the spirit of Are You Afraid of the Dark is having the Midnight Society actually be part of the story, as they are often the composers of those stories, and bringing supernatural elements into that framing device muddies the water. I can certainly appreciate that argument, but this isn't the first time the franchise has gone down this route. In Season 7 of the original show, we had Tale of the Silver Sight, a sort of unofficial 10-year anniversary 3-parter that sent the Midnight Society on a quest against supernatural evil. So there's precedent for this kind of thing within the franchise. What really makes it all work is the talent of the young actors involved. This is a great cast with a lot of chemistry. They really play off each other in fun ways. That said, Akiko is a bit of a weak link here. She's my biggest criticism of the miniseries. Not Check's performance. She's great. She's got an amazing presence and good comedic timing. But Akiko is written to be a bit more over the top than the rest of the characters, who are pretty grounded. Akiko feels like she came from a completely different show.
The line is, oh my god, it's a zombie.
Does it really matter, Akiko?
You're fired.
You're joking.
Am I?
Akiko does settle down a bit in Part 3, when the stakes are raised. And again, all the actors here are great. I imagine in 20 years we'll be looking back at this and admiring where these future A-listers got their start, in the same way we watched the original series to watch baby Ryan Gosling and Jay Baruchel. There are some rumors about expanding this into a full television series, though it's too early to say for sure. And if we can continue with this cast and this quality of storytelling, I am very on board. You could argue that this didn't need to be an Are You Afraid of the Dark property, that the story and filmmaking is good enough without the branding, but then, well, it wouldn't have gotten made. By putting the Are You Afraid of the Dark name on it, it allows a quality horror story to reach a wider audience, something very accessible to a young audience while still being just enough like the original series to please all but the most nitpicky millennial parents. This is nostalgia bait, sure, but it's damn good nostalgia bait. And if this is what we can expect from Nickelodeon in the near future, the channel might be in a pretty good place.
Nick Nickelodeon. Nick Nickelodeon.
If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on Are You Afraid of the Dark's miniseries, if you'd like to support Nick Knacks and other popular remakes, reboots, or consider contributing to my Patreon, where every dollar goes to production values and the miniseries' place within it. Link in the description below. You can also support the Pop Arena by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel, hitting that bell icon for notifications, following me on Twitter, sending a one-time donation through PayPal or Coffee, and sharing Nick Knacks with all your friends. I hope you all have a spooky day!